Hello, welcome. This is Sam of Sambookery. In this video, I'm doing a full assembly tutorial for my junk journal kits. This tutorial will apply to any of the junk journal kits that I have. I'm going to be using the Sunflower Market kit to demonstrate it, but again, it'll work for any kit that you get. I just want to have like a master tutorial with all the simple steps laid out for you guys step by step, so it's super easy when you buy the kit to put it together. So the first thing you want to do is print everything out, right? So we'll start with the papers you want to use and whether or not things need to be double-sided. So first we're going to print out the cover and the cover lining. We're going to print those on cardstock. I use 80-pound cardstock for mine, which is about 220 GSM. That's a good weight. You could go a little thicker if you wanted. That's the best weight my printer takes, so that's the one I use. And you do not need to back the cover or the lining. So save your ink. Just print on the front on cardstock. Also, do not print borderless. If that box is checked, make sure you uncheck it. It will not be the right size if you print borderless. It's okay to have this white edge around here. We need that. Next, you'll want to print the journal pages. The journal pages I print on copy paper. I use 32-pound copy paper, which is a pretty heavyweight one. 32-pound is about 120 GSM. You can use whatever size you have. You can also print on cardstock if you want. So you want to print out all 10 journal pages. They're all horizontal. Again, don't do borderless. Print them out. They'll have a white border around them. Get them all printed out. And again, you don't have to print all 10 in the kit. If there's 5 you like, print 2 of each of those. It's your kit. Do it however you want. I always print out 1 of each one just so I can show you guys the variety. And they all have these dots down the center. These are there to help us when we bind the journal. Once you get them all printed out, you will need to send them back through the printer to print on the back side. To do that, if you have a bottom feed printer like I have, you're going to want to put them in the bottom tray face up. And honestly, they come out on the printer tray like this in this direction, and I just open the bottom tray and I just drop them in. Because the bottom feed printers pull the paper in like this, they flip it, and then they're printing on this side. So that's how you do it. If you have a back feed printer that's got the opening in the back, then you'll want to turn all your pages over so that the printed side is back, and this is just white paper, and stick them in the back tray like this, because it feeds through like this and prints this way. You can pick any papers you want to print on the back. I give you many options in the kit. Most of the options are non-directional, so it can go any way. But remember, the journal pages are all horizontal. So there may be a few prints, backing prints in the kit that are directional vertical, so you want to avoid those unless it doesn't bother you. There's full prints, there's plain things, all over prints. This kit, most of them are non-directional, so you can print anything. I did have this one vertical paper in the kit because these are meant to be like sunflower seeds. It doesn't bother me to have them sideways, and I like to print everything out when I do these demos so you can just see everything. But it doesn't bother me. But some of them are definitely vertically oriented. Just don't pick those for the back. You can print the same couple of pages on the back. You don't have to print this huge variety. So most of these will look good any direction. So there's no difficulty in, like, you know, lining up your paper when you stick it in the printer to print on the back. They'll go any direction. So send these pages through and print on the back of all the pages. So we've got our 10 pages on regular copy paper, and our cover and our lining on cardstock. Don't back the cover and lining because they will be put together like this. So you don't need to back them, but back all your pages. The other things in the kit, I usually print all of them on cardstock. But I will show you a couple that you may want to choose to print on paper. Just because cardstock is sturdier, these are journaling cards. They're going to be going in and out of pockets. You want them sturdy. So here, the journaling cards are all vertically oriented, so you can print the non-directional prints on them. Just don't print any purely horizontal prints, like, unless you like that look. But let's see, this one is a purely horizontal print. So if you print it on the back of the journaling cards, it's going to be going this direction. It might not be terrible, it depends what you want to do, but just keep in mind the direction. But there's lots of options to pick from. So you want to print your journaling cards, send them back through, same way I said to do the pages, to print on the back of them. We've got the tags. They're vertically oriented too, so just don't pick any horizontal images for the backing. The envelopes, these are 2 coin envelopes with matching cards that fit inside. Print this on cardstock as well because you want the journaling cards to be sturdy. And you want to back it because you want something on the back of the journaling cards. And I always back my envelopes too. I just pick something plain on that one. Now this large envelope, where the only thing on the page is an envelope, this is one you can print on regular paper if you want to. I usually don't. I did it here just to show you guys. If you're going to use your envelopes for flips, you're going to be accessing them a lot, I would use cardstock. If you're just making an envelope and tucking it in a pocket, it's not going to get used a lot, regular paper will be fine. It's sturdy enough. But I usually back mine, and then that gives me a second option when I'm folding them. If I end up not wanting this side out, I can have whatever's on the back facing out on the envelope. So, backing the envelopes. Pockets. You do not need to back pockets, and I do recommend print on cardstock. You want them sturdy. Regular paper won't work, but don't need to print on the back at all. We've got 2 kinds of pockets. This is the other kind. Don't need to print on the back. Some kits may have different shape pockets. None of the pockets need to be printed on the back. Here we've got some ephemera. These are word strips, tabs, and circles. These do not need to be printed on the back. These will be glued down. These will be glued down. These fold in half together, so there's no white showing. So don't waste your ink on the back of those. Same as these. No need to print on the back, but use cardstock. You want these sturdy. The fussy cuts, this one's up to you. Depends on how you use your fussy cuts. If you're going to cut them out and glue them all down flat, you do not need to print on the back. If you are going to tuck them into pockets to make them like a dimensional element you can move out, in and out, print on the back. Either way, print on cardstock. They'll be too flimsy on regular paper. I back mine because some of them I will leave out, especially the flowers I leave out and I just tuck them in pockets. If they can come out, I want something on the back. Many of these I will just glue down, but it's nice to have the option. This one's large enough that it can be a journaling card, so you can fussy cut around it, stick it in a pocket, and flip it over and use it as a journaling card. So those are my recommendations for printing. If you misprint anything, don't throw it away, hang on to it. You might be able to use it somewhere in your journal. There's lots of fun things you can do with the extra papers. So don't throw them away yet. And I will also say, when you're cutting things out, save all the scraps. Save that are not too tiny, you know. Save the strips, save this big piece right here. You may want to punch some shapes out of them. You may want to use them as a layering or collage element in your pages. So just hang on to the big pieces when you're cutting everything out. All right, so go ahead and get your 10 journal pages and your cover and your cover lining printed out, and then we will start to assemble. Okay, here are the tools we'll be using to assemble this junk journal kit. A scoring board. If you don't have a scoring board, you can get a ruler and something similar to this nail file and use that to score your lines. A paper trimmer, a pair of big scissors, a pair of detail scissors. Optional, a hole punch for punching holes in the tags. We'll need some sort of glue. I like to use art glitter glue, but a PVA white glue would be good as well, even Fabri-Tac, and a glue stick. We'll need an awl to poke the holes for a book binding, a bone folder for setting the creases in our papers. We'll need some waxed thread. If you don't have waxed bookbinding thread, but you've got embroidery floss, pearl cotton, something like that, if you get a chunk of 100% beeswax, you can just run your thread along this beeswax a couple of times, and that waxes the thread. Having wax thread makes it a lot easier to do the binding portion, but it is not 100% necessary, and if all you have is embroidery floss, that will be fine. You'll need some clips to hold your pages together when we bind. I like these giant paper clips, but any kind of binding clip will work. And you'll need a needle to use with your book binding thread. I like to use a tapestry needle. It has a big eye and a blunt end. If you want to ink your kit, you'll need some distress ink and one of these ink sponges. And then some optional punches that I like to use. This is a corner rounder that does a small, medium, and large. If you want to round your journal pages or any of the ephemera like the journaling cards. There are several 1-inch circles in the kit, and if you have a 1-inch circle punch, that makes it easy to punch those out. And several of the pockets in the kit have a round notch on the top of them, and if you have a 1.5-inch circle punch, it makes it easy to punch that little round notch out of the pockets. Not necessary, but helpful if you have one. So those are the supplies. Gather your supplies, and we will come back here and get started assembling the journal. Okay, you've got everything printed. Let's set the ephemera pages aside for now. Grab your cover, your lining, and your journal pages. We'll start with the cover. You want to grab a scoreboard, and you see we've got these black registration marks right here. We're going to use those to line this up with a line on our scoreboard. These are a 1/2 inch apart, so that helps you line up on here. And we're just going to score along these lines, which is going to make our spine for our journal. And then we'll also do the same all the way around the perimeter. So you see these lines in the corners. We're just going to score along those lines as well, because the edges are going to turn into tabs that we're going to fold back. Having these tabs gives us a lot of stability to the journal and a lot more structure. So just flip this around and score on all of these lines. Let's see, we didn't do this one. Be sure to do the scoring before you cut. Don't cut anything yet, because these registration marks will get cut off. Let me just tuck this over here. Okay, so on the cover, we score the center. You guys can see that in the light. And then all the way around the perimeter. And on the lining, we're just going to score in the center. So just this 1/2 inch spine right here in the center. Okay, we will use the scoring board for some of the ephemera, but for assembling just the main journal structure, you're done with the scoring board. Now for the cover, we only need to cut a few things. We're not going to cut this white border off, but we are going to cut the corner triangles off. So just grab a pair of scissors and chop off the corners. And then we will also cut out these triangles right here. So just carefully cut those out. If you've got small scissors, those are great for getting into this tiny space too. And do that on the top and the bottom. Okay, here's our finished cover. This is what it should look like. Leave these white bits on. They're going to be part of our tabs that we fold back, and it's better to have the tabs be a little bit wider. It's easier to fold. Now on the cover lining, just cut off all the white. You don't need the marks anymore, and that's all you need to do. So for that, paper trimmer is handy. Let's see, it goes this way. Or you can use a pair of scissors and just cut off all the white edge. Now that we've got them both scored and trimmed, we just need to fold on the score line. So grab your bone folder. Now the lining is going to go on the inside of the cover. It's going to be like this. So when you fold the lining, you're going to fold it printed side to printed side. Have the white side up. So give it a fold and press that crease in. All right, and that is our cover lining. Now let's do the cover. We're going to do the same thing, but remember this time white to white. So we'll do the center creases and then we'll go around and do the perimeter creases. So I tried to give it a gentle fold first to get it going in the right direction and then set the crease with your bone folder. Don't forget these little tiny tabs here. Do this all the way around. Okay, and here's how it should look when you are done. One side note, if you are inking your journal, one thing you may want to do before we assemble it is if any of your corners don't meet up exactly where there's a gap and you can see this white underneath, you might want to put a little ink there, especially just right at the tip because that's the part that won't be covered by the lining. And then as well, these two triangles here, these very little tips right here will be visible once we put the lining in. So if you're inking, you might just want to put a tiny bit of ink right there. Let's get some. Because this is something you can't easily access once the journal's assembled. And I think all my corners lined up on this one, so I don't need to ink there. But if there's a little bit of a gap, you just open this up and just do that. So when it's closed, you're not seeing just the white. I'm using Distress Oxide Vintage Photo for this kit. I just like this one. I think it looks nice with it, but whatever ink you use, just run in these spots. So now we just need to glue these tabs down so they stay in place. I like to use art glitter glue. It's a white glue that dries very quickly and has a very strong hold. It dries in about 3 seconds. You're just going to run a little bit of glue along the tab and then fold it in. You could also choose to use a tape runner or double-sided tape here as well. But I find art glitter glue works the best for me. If you're using another white glue that takes a little bit longer to dry, you'll want to grab a clip and clip down that tab so it won't pop up until the glue is finished setting. You could also set something heavy on there, just something to hold those tabs down until your adhesive has set. And don't forget to fold in these little tiny tabs in the spine as well. So you're just going to do this all the way around for each tab around the perimeter, either using glue or tape. And that gives you a nice finished edge around your journal, no raw edge paper, and it's a nice double thickness. And don't worry about the little bit of white there. We're going to cover that up when we put in the cover lining. So once you have all the tabs glued down, just set your cover aside so that it can fully dry, and then we will work on assembling the text block. Grab your journal pages, and on these there are registration marks here, but I don't use them. I think it's the most important thing on your journal pages is to line up these two sides when they're folded in half. And if you don't cut 100% accurately, using this to score your line won't result in your edges being exact, because if you cut a tiny bit more off this side than this side, they won't be exact. So I just chop off all the white and then we go ahead and fold everything in half. So that's all we're going to do. I'll show you one page to get you guys started, but this is a pretty easy process. Just line it up, chop off the white strip. Now I threw all the scraps away from the cover and the lining because they were not printed on the back. They were white. These are printed on the back. And there's not a ton structural uses for the paper scraps rather than the cardstock scraps, but these are great to layer under a word strip. If you've got a little word strip cut out and you cut out one of these and just layer it behind it, it just adds a whole nother element. It makes it look more finished and nice. So I do save anything with printing on it. These might be a little too narrow, but anything with printing on it, I will save and set aside until I'm done with the journal in case it comes up that I need a piece. And that saves you from having to dig in the trash when a need arises. You're like, oh, I need one more piece. I don't want to waste ink printing anything else out. So just make a pile to the side of all your scraps from the kit. So here's our journal page, all trimmed out. And then we're going to fold it in half. And I'm going to fold it in both directions because I'm not sure which side I want out until I start putting my journal pages together. So I'll fold it this way and set the crease, and then I'm going to fold it this way and set the crease, and do that to all of them and just set them aside. And once we get them all together, we will decide what order we want to put them in. So I've got all of my pages folded in half and trimmed out. And then I did go ahead and use my distress ink to ink lightly around the edges of the pages and along the center crease, as well as around the lining and journal cover, just to add a little distressing. So now we just need to organize our pages into 2 groups of 5. So those will be our 2 signatures. So we're just going to put these pages in a pleasant order. And the only thing to keep in mind is that you want to have the 5 pre-printed holes in the center of each group of pages. And if you don't, I'll show you a workaround, but those are the holes that we need to poke so we can use our thread to bind the pages into the journal lining. So I usually start with picking what page I want to be the first one you see when you open the journal. To me, that's like the most important page. And then I'll also pick what page I want to be on the outside of the second signature. Once I pick those 2, then we just start layering the pages inside, trying to see which pages you like next to each other. And also just making sure you still got everything facing the correct direction, facing up. So try to alternate between pages that have a full-size image with pages that are more subtle or with lines, so that there's a variety as you're turning the pages throughout the book. And then another important one is the one that you put in the center of the spread. This is when the signature's open, that's what you're going to see. So if you've got like a full scene, like these sunflowers here, that's really nice to have in your center of your signature. Or if you want to do something like put a lot of pockets in the center, then maybe you want to put a plainer page because you know you're going to be covering up with pockets and stuffing them full of like the heavy ephemera. So something like this one. Those are the 2 things that I consider when I'm putting my pages together. You can put yours together in any order or style you want. I'll finish going through mine and I will show you my final decision and we'll move on to the next step. So after you get your signatures put together, we'll do a last flip through just to make sure you like the layout and that everything is facing the correct direction. You didn't accidentally turn anything upside down. And make sure you like the order. So I'm just flipping through my first signature here, and then I ended up having this page in the center, and it does have the 5 holes on it that we're going to use to poke the holes for our binding. So that works out. So I'm just flipping through the rest of the first signature here, looking at how the pages look together, and then here's our second signature. Just making sure I like how it's laid out. You know, those don't look so good together. I'm just going to flip this around because I like that ledger paper with that more burlappy orange burlap color better. Now that does mean that I don't have the 5 holes showing in the center, but I've got a fix for that coming up. I'll show you. It's no big deal. I think it's more important to have the page layout the way you want. So we've got both signatures ready to go. Everything looks good. We just need to grab our bookbinding supplies now. We've got a needle, some thread, a couple of clips, 4 clips, and then an awl to poke the holes. And then we'll need our cover lining. We don't need the cover right now. You can push that aside, but we do need the lining. And we need to poke holes in the pages as well as the lining. So I've grabbed a piece of, this is like 1-inch like insulation foam. It's actually something I use to make a quilting design wall, just an offcut. But you can use a book or an old magazine or something else you don't care about to poke a hole, because you want to be able to poke straight down and not, you know, mar your tabletop when we're poking the holes in the cover lining here. So an old phone book, anything like that, just to protect your work surface. Or if you have like a self-healing cutting mat you can put on your desk or something. There we go. We poked 2 sets of 5 holes in the cover lining, and that's ready to go. And now we need to poke the holes in our signatures. So take your first signature and make sure your pages are lined up, especially in the center spine area. And then put your clips along the top edge. You want to make it nice and tight so everything is the same height, but also that everything is pressed in really nice to the center there. So you don't want like big gaps between the pages there. And we'll just do the same thing to our second signature. But remember, we need to flip that center page around just for now so that the holes are on the inside there. But we'll flip it back around before we stitch it in. We just need it there as a guide to poke the holes. And that way all the holes on our signature pages line up with the same spacing as the holes on our cover lining. So grab your awl. We're going to hold your pages at about 90 degrees or less on your tabletop. And we're going to start at the top hole and push, and I kind of do a gentle twist just to get the awl to come through the back side there. And we do that to each of the 5 holes. You're going through 5 pieces of paper, so you want to press firmly, but you don't have to press too hard. And I find a little bit of a twisting motion makes it go through easier. You just want to keep holding all the pages together and make sure they're nice and tight. And we should do the same thing for the second set of pages. Gentle twisting, and then all 5 holes. And there's the bottom hole, and then we're done. So we'll grab our cover lining. Now, if your cover lining has a direction, make sure you've got the direction going the right way up. This one is stripes, it doesn't have a direction. All right, so let's flip over that center signature page so that we've got it in the order we want, and then just reclip it. Make sure none of the other pages shifted besides that center one. And then I'm just going to grab my awl and poke the holes, kind of just wiggle them to make sure they're all lined up the same. Just for security's sake, just because that center one might not have been exactly lined up with the other ones. I'm not poking new holes. I'm just keeping them aligned. So grab your cover lining. Again, make sure it's right side up. And we are going to line up our signatures with the holes that are pre-punched in the lining. And we will start with the back signature, and that we'll be sewing that into the right hand set of holes on the cover lining. There's a left hand set and a right hand set when it's laying flat. And so we're going to get our waxed thread here, and we're going to cut a piece that is 4 times the height of our journal. And this is pretty standard anytime you're doing a 3-hole or a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. If you want to have extra thread in case you need to tie on some charms, I don't know if you need to, but you want to tie on some charms or beads, do 4 times the height of your journal. If you're just going to cut the threads off pretty short and hide them on the inside, you only need to do 3 times the height of your journal. But go ahead and thread your needle, and we're going to start from the inside of the second signature in the center hole and go to the outside and pull our string through. And it's important to leave a tail, and you want to leave a pretty long tail. I'm showing you how long mine is there. It's about a 9-inch tail. Because as you stitch, it does kind of get pulled when you're pulling and it gets shorter. So you want to start longer is better. So we've got our tail. Now we're going to go in the center right-hand hole in the cover lining and then come out on the back of it in the white, on the white side. And then hold your pages to your lining kind of close together so when you pull the string, they're together. And then grab your tail. Don't lose your tail. It can get shorter and shorter as you go, but hang on to it. And now we're going up one hole. So make sure you're going up in a straight line through the next hole up. We're going to go through the cover lining and then through the journal pages. Sometimes you can get it to go through both at the same time. And then you can just pull your needle through. Sometimes if you're not holding them right and they don't line up, you can go through the cover lining, pull your thread all the way through, and then go through the journal pages. Now flip it over and make sure your stitch is nice and tight. Grab a hold of your tail and your string and give it a little bit of a pull. Now we're going to go up to the very top hole and we're going to come back out the very top hole in our lining. Give it a nice gentle pull. Now we're going to go down one hole and go back through the lining and into our journal pages. And after each stitch, you want to hold on to the tail and the thread that's got the needle on it and give it a little bit of a pull to tighten up your stitches, and always check to make sure there's nothing loose. Make sure you're not getting your thread tangled around your clips. All right, we're skipping the center hole and going down to the one up from the bottom, the fourth hole down or one up from the bottom. And then we're going to go in the bottom hole. Now we're coming up in the bottom hole on the lining, and now I'm going through the bottom hole in the journal pages because I didn't have them lined up exactly, and that's totally fine to do it that way. All right, and now we just have one place left to go, and that's to go up one hole, which is the fourth hole down from the top. And that'll fill in our line of stitches there. And then when you come through on the lining, there's only one place left to go, and that's back into the center hole. That's where we started. Now when you come up, don't put your needle all the way through. Put it up a little bit, and you want to look. You've got a long string going through the center, and you've got a tail. You want your needle to come up on the opposite side of the center string from your tail. So you kind of maybe just move the string over a tiny bit so your needle can get through and up. And now you've got your tail on one side and your needle coming up on the opposite side. And that just allows us to tie our knot over this center string and hold it in place. So you can take your needle off now, and now we're going to give a gentle but firm pull on your thread. Make sure it's not loose. Flip it over, have a look, touch your threads, make sure none of them are very loose. And it looks good. So now we are going to just tie a knot over that center string. Just a simple overhand knot like when you tie shoelaces. And we'll just do that twice. And now you have bound the first signature into your cover lining. So I like my strings nice and long. They don't need to be even. We're going to trim them at the end, but I like them nice and long. So if I want to tie on beads or charms, I have a lot of room to do that. If you don't want to tie anything on, you can cut them off nice and short and just hide them in the journal. But I like the option to add something to it. And you can always decide later that you don't want to, but if you already have short strings, then you can't make them longer. So we can take our clips off now. And that is our back signature. Now we're going to put in our first signature. So again, we're going to do 4 times the height of the journal to measure our string. And I don't know if I mentioned this. I think I did. This is a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. It's a very standard bookbinding stitch. Super quick and easy. And it's very sturdy. So we're threading our needle again. We're going to start from inside the journal pages in the center hole and go from the inside to the outside. And then we'll go in the center hole of the journal cover lining. And just keep your tail long. You can measure it against the tails from the other signature. So we're going out the center hole of the lining. And then up one hole, go back through the lining, go to the inside, and I'm going to try to line it up with the hole in the journal pages. There we go. And pull it through, hang on to your tail so your tail doesn't get shorter and shorter. Now we're going up one hole, going through the pages, through the lining. And we'll come out at the very top hole on the cover lining. Now I got my string wrapped around my clip here. That happens a lot, so that's why you check after every stitch. You check and make sure your thread's tight and it's not wrapped around anything. Now we'll go down one hole, which is the second hole, and come back through our journal pages. Now we're going to pull it tight, make sure nothing's loose, and then we're going to skip this center hole and go down to the fourth hole and go through the pages out into the cover lining. And be careful not to poke yourself new holes. That's why I like tapestry needles, because they're blunt, so they're not poking new holes. They're just helping me find the holes that are already there. So now we're going in the very bottom hole from the lining through the journal pages. And now we're just going to go up one hole, which is the fourth hole. We go from inside the journal pages out into the journal lining. And then you give it a little tug, and then you can see there's only one place left because we're completing our line of stitches. So go back in the center hole. Now remember, when we come up in the center hole, don't come all the way up yet. You want to come up and then make sure that you're coming up on the opposite side of the center string from the tail that's already there. And it doesn't matter which side, which one's on. Just whatever side the tail's on, come up on the opposite side. We can take our needle off at this point and give our final tightening of our thread to tighten our stitches. And then we're just going to tie a double knot. Don't forget to have a look on the back and also make sure you didn't wrap any of your thread around the clips. All right, so now everything's tight. We just need to tie a knot. I'm just checking the strings to make sure they're semi-even. And just tie one single knot, pull it pretty tight, and then tie one more knot. And that is it. And if you are not using waxed thread, you may want to put a tiny dab of glue on the knot, or fray check, just to make sure it doesn't work itself out over time. And that's it. Take your clips off. We've bound the pages into the cover lining, and we've made our text block for our journal. Now I'm just opening every page and gently giving it a fold to make sure that the pages will lay nice and flat when I'm working in the journal. And last chance to make sure you got everything right, nothing got crooked or upside down, because once we glue it to the cover, there's really no saving it. At this point, we could snip the threads, re-stitch it in, not a big deal. Once we glue it to the cover, there's no going back. Everything looks good to me. I'm just giving it a nice little crease, and then here's our center again. Okay, everything is looking good and laying nice and flat. And last page. All right, we are all done with that. Now we are ready to glue this text block we just made into the cover. So grab your cover that you had sitting aside, letting the glue dry, and I'm just lining it up in here to make sure everything looks like it fits, nothing's sticking out. Looks good. So if you're just going to use a regular white glue, a PVA glue, you're just going to flip this over, spread it all over the back of the cover lining, especially getting it around where the threads are, and then just lay it down on top of the journal cover and just make sure you have centered it, top to bottom, left to right. There should be a really small gap all the way around. And then just make sure that the spines, creases line up with each other, and then just lay it flat to dry. And I'm just looking here left to right, top to bottom, to make sure that small little gap is even all the way around. But what I'm going to do is use a glue stick and my art glitter glue to glue mine down. So I do it a little bit differently because the art glitter glue dries so quickly. If I spread it over the whole thing, by the time I go to lay it down, part of the glue will already be dried. So I'm just showing you that I'm going to put the glue stick in the center, and then around the perimeter and especially down the spine, I'm going to put the art glitter glue. So you do need kind of glue all over to hold it down because this is what's keeping your cover hooked to your journal pages. So I'm kind of just lining it up again, top to bottom, left to right, making sure that the spines match up from the cover and the lining. And then I'm putting the left side down on my desk and just holding it with my left hand so it doesn't move while I put the glue stick all over the center of the back of the cover lining on the right side. And that's just giving me a little extra adhesion, but really what's going to hold it down is the art glitter glue because this stuff is really strong. So now I'm just running a bead of art glitter glue right along the edge on all four sides of this right hand side of the cover lining. And you want to put the glue on the cover lining, not the cover itself, because the lining is slightly smaller than the cover. And if you run glue all the way to the edge of the cover, it's going to be seeping out. So you want to put it on the lining, not the cover. So I flip that side down and just give it a good press, especially around the edges to make sure it's adhering. And then we're going to flip the other way, and I'm going to put a lot of glue on the spine area. I want to make sure I get it on the paper, but also on the thread that we use to bind the journal, because it's a little bulky there, and you want to have a lot of extra glue so that I can seep in and hold everything together. So I'm just doing that, and then the art glitter glue dries fast, so I'm going to go ahead and fold it and press it together so it can start adhering the cover to the cover lining. And then I flip to the middle between the two signatures because this is a place where you can press directly on the cover lining. And just making sure it's getting a good seal here. And now I'm just going to go ahead and flip back, and I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm putting the glue stick around the center, or all over the center of the front of the cover lining, and then I'm going to add the art glitter glue around the edge again. And that just really makes sure the edge of the paper doesn't curl up or lift up. And then just close the journal and lay it flat, giving a nice final good press. And you can just let it sit for a while and let your glue dry. If you're using regular like PVA glue or white glue, you want to let it dry for maybe 24 hours just to make sure it's good and dry. The art glitter glue, I give it a couple hours and it is good to go. But that's it. We have made the journal. Now we can look at cutting out all of the ephemera to decorate the journal. I won't go over everything, but there's a few things I wanted to talk about that maybe have a little bit more specialty instructions if you've never made a junk journal kit before. So fussy cuts are simple. You're just going to cut around the edges on those. But I did want to start with the pockets. That's something I usually start with when I'm making journals, is add the pockets in first because that's your storage for a lot of the other ephemera. So pull out the pocket pages. I've already cut them out here. Just cut around the edges. And then if you have a 1.5 inch circle punch, you can use that to punch out the notches on the top of the So just line up the white area in your punch and make sure it's completely in there, and there you go. Super quick and easy way to notch the pockets. And it works on either type of pocket. Now that makes a little bit a deeper notch. If you also have a 2-inch circle punch, that will make a more shallow notch. I'll show you on this one. And it just depends which look you prefer or which punch you happen to have. But it makes quick work of it. But you don't need a punch. You can just as easily grab a pair of scissors and just cut out these little scoops. And it doesn't take much time at all. So whichever method you like. These pockets are gusseted pockets. They have 3 tabs on them, and so you do need your scoring board to score on the lines so that we can fold the tabs back. These are great pockets. They hold so many things. So just lining it up with a line on my scoring board and just scoring on each of the 3 tabs. And then once they're all scored, we're just folding them back and then setting the creases with our bone folder. And any pockets that have tabs like this is how you would do it, no matter what the shape is. And then you'll just run glue on the 3 tabs and glue it down. For these flat pockets, you're just going to run glue on the flat sides, on all 3 sides besides the notched part, which is the top opening. The next thing I wanted to show you about, which we will need the scoring board for, is the envelopes. There's the large pointed flap envelope, and there's also the 2 small coin envelopes. So I've already done 2 just to show you what they'll look like. But it's very simple, and we're just going to be scoring around the rectangle so that the flaps all fold in. So we'll start with the pointed flap envelope. We're just going to score from one corner to the other corner and just kind of line up those corners on one line on your scoring board and just gently press it in. And you just rotate and do that for each side. It's super quick and easy. And again, if you don't have a scoring board, a ruler and something, pointy but kind of blunt will run a score line for you. And that was it. Now we're just going to fold everything in and then give it a good crease. And since I always print something on the back of my envelopes, there's always an option at this point to see if I rather which side of the envelope I want facing out. On this one, I'd rather have that pale green on the inside. I think that is nice for an inside. So we're just folding down the top flap and we are all set. And that is all you need to do. Same thing on the coin envelopes. There's no lines to follow, but you're just lining up the little angles at the top and the bottom and just line them both up on the same line on the scoring board. And then this part here is the top envelope flap. And just fold them all in. You'll notice there's a wide side flap and a narrow side flap. Always put the narrow one in first and then the wide one. And there's the envelope. Now, if you ink, I like to ink my envelopes before I glue them. That way I can get around all of the edges. As once it's glued, you can only access the outside. You can't get the edges that overlap. And I like to have those inked. It's not necessary, it's preference, but that's something I wanted to mention in case you do it too, because sometimes I'll score the envelopes, I'll fold them, and I'll just grab my glue and glue them, and I go, oh, no, I forgot to ink them. So when I'm cutting everything out for a kit, I'll usually cut everything out, and I won't assemble anything. Then next I'll go through and do any scoring that needs to be done, and then I'll go through and do all the inking, and then I'll come back with the glue and glue the envelopes, and then glue the pockets in and stuff. I do reverse fold the flap, the top flap, so I can ink the inside crease, because I think that just helps it look a little worn and vintage. But that's the only thing I ink on the inside of the envelopes. Just going around the outside edge and then all of the folded edges. And of course you can do the folded edges once it's already assembled, but since I already have the ink out, I'm just doing it all now. And again, I'm using the Distress Oxide in Vintage Photo for this kit, but there are a lot of great inks out there. I also like Ground Espresso and Frayed Burlap. It just depends on what the colors are in the kits. So now we grab some glue. Again, I'm using the Art Glitter Glue, and I'm looking to see where the bottom flap overlaps the side flaps, because I don't want to put glue in the center, because that would glue the envelope closed. So I'm just paying attention to like how far I need to put the glue over, and just run a little bit of glue right along the edge there. And then do it on the other side as well. Then I hold the flaps down with one hand and just close the bottom of the envelope. But before I wait too long, I let go and make sure I didn't seep any glue through that closed the envelope up, but it looks fine. It popped open. So, and that is all you do to make the envelopes. Now we'll do the coin envelope. These are one of my favorites. I love coin envelopes. On this one, you leave it open and you're going to run a bead of glue on, we're going to close the narrow flap and run a bead of glue on the outside of the narrow flap on the edge, and leave open the wide flap and run a bead of glue along that edge and overlap them. And then that gives you a really good seal when the envelope is closed. Now for the bottom, just run glue along the very bottom of the flap, because the side ones leave a little bit of a gap there. And if you put glue all over the bottom flap, you're going to make your pocket not as deep, and you may have trouble getting your cards in there. But that is it. Those are our envelopes. The next thing we're going to look at is this sheet and some of the other things. So if you have a corner rounder, that's great to use on the journaling cards, the square ones or the rectangle ones. I love to round the corners on those. If you have a hole punch, you can use that to punch out the holes in the tags. But I will show you the word strips. They're just in one big block, and you can use a paper trimmer and cut them into strips and then cut them down smaller if you want, or you can just fussy cut one out at a time. It just depends on how you want to use them. Here I'm just going to cut one out and just show you something you can do with them with some of the scraps that we saved from earlier. So here's our tiny word strip, and then remember we were saving the papers that we trimmed off from some of the journal pages, and I think this would look cute kind of centered on one of these papers that's in a different color, so that helps the word strip, the label, stand out a little bit better. And you see when you lay it on here with just the green words on a green background, it kind of disappears, but if you put it on a yellow background, that helps it stand out a little bit. That's just one option for the word strips. But we wanted to look also, we've got on here the tabs and these circles. I want to remind you again, if you want to use a 1-inch circle punch for the circles, you do have to make sure when you print it out that you're not printing borderless if you're doing JPEGs, and if you're doing PDFs, make sure you check the box actual size. Sometimes it defaults to fit or scale to fit, and that will make them a little bit small. All right, when you cut out the tabs, cut them out in a square. Don't cut out the sides yet. Fold them in half. Give them a good crease with your bone folder, and then we'll cut the little bit of white bits off the side. That way, each side will match each other perfectly. If you cut them out while it's still open, there's a likelihood they won't match up, and you'll end up seeing a little bit of white from the back of the tab when you fold it in half. But this way they match up perfectly, and it's a lot easier to cut them at the same time. And I just want to show you punching out the circles. So I do my punch, I have to cut fairly close to the circles for my punch to reach. But I also want to let you know to leave them in a strip or in a bigger piece, because if you cut right around one circle, it's really difficult to get your hands in the punch to maneuver the circle where you want it to be within the punch window. So you, of course, can just cut them out by hand if you want with scissors. But if you have the 1-inch punch, Just flip it over and you can move them around so that you get the image centered in the punch and you don't see any white around the edge of the image. And as long as you don't see any white, they're good to punch out. And it makes quick work of it, and it always looks a little bit nicer than if you cut them with scissors. Okay, that's all the tips I had for cutting out the ephemera. Now we are ready to add things into the journals we made. We're going to start with the pockets. So go ahead and grab your journal. Make sure the glue is dry and it's ready to be worked in. And I always like to start with pockets because that gives me a place to tuck the rest of the ephemera. I always like to put one pocket on the front cover and one on the back cover. So I chose a nice gusseted pocket for the front of the cover on this one. And again, just run glue on the flaps. Make sure it doesn't go over onto the white because that will glue your pocket down. And we're just centering it here. There's plenty of space. The pockets aren't super tight. There's a lot of room around them, so put it where you want. And just, the art glitter glue dries in a few seconds, but just give it a few seconds before you stick something in the pocket, because if you put it in too soon, it may get stuck in the glue. And then I chose another gusseted pocket to put on the back cover. I just wanted to show you guys adding these in. I think they're an important first step because then that gives you a place to work, and then you can do the other ephemera at your leisure, and you'll have somewhere to tuck in like the journaling cards and the fussy cuts and the things that you're cutting out later on. I wanted to show this too. This is the center of the signature, and you don't always have to put all of your pockets at the bottom of the page. You can double stack them like this, and you can put the shorter things in the top pocket and the taller things in the bottom pocket. And that also helps even out the journal, because if you stick everything along the very bottom of the bottom of the journal will be thicker than the top, and it'll look a little awkward. But that was my tips for pockets. I only printed the pockets out once, but you could always print them out multiple times if you want to have tons of pockets in your journal. There's plenty of places to add more in here. But I just wanted to show you one last thing, which is how I add my tabs to my journals. And you can put them anywhere. You can print multiple of them. But I want to show you how I put them onto the pages. So I open them up. If you ink them first, because it's a lot easier to do that before you fold them and glue them. And then I like to run just a thin bead of glue along the very bottom edge of one side. Not on the desk, just on the tab. And then I lift it up and decide, do I want to put it towards the top of the page, bottom of the page, the center. If I'm doing multiple, I usually start at the top and just move down one tab width as I go. But I'll put it behind the page, lay the page on it, fold it over, and then adjust it. Make sure it is straight and looks nice and straight. And then I'll flip it open and go ahead and put glue all over the rest of it so that it glues to itself as well as to the page. I love putting tabs in journals. I always put them. I think they're a fun addition, and they help you, divide your journal into sections. And that is all we have for tabs. So that's it for the basic assembly of the junk journal. I hope you guys found this very easy to follow, step by step. If you have any questions, always reach out to me. But it's a pretty straightforward process. It's my favorite way to make journals. I think it's quick and it's easy, and you don't have to come up with any extra things to make a cover. It's already all included in the printable. So that's fun. The fun part now is adding all of the ephemera and working in the journal. But I did want to show you guys some alternate methods for assembling your journal. If you don't have the bookbinding supplies, or maybe you just don't like this method. So I've got some few ideas to show you. So here are some previous journals I have made from similar kits. And we'll look at this one. This is Woodland Impressions. And in this one I did, the first thing I did was a closure. In between the lining and the cover, I glued a piece of cotton ribbon, fabric ribbon, in there. So it's secure inside. It's permanently part of the cover. And that way I can use it to wrap around the journal and close it. And you could put one on both sides if you want, and you could tie a bow with them. I'm more of a wrap person. I just like to wrap it and tuck it. But if you want to put another one in there, you could tie them together in a bow. And just have one come out of the front and one out of the back. Just try to line them up so they're coming out at the same spot. But this book is not hooked together with the 5-hole pamphlet stitch like we just did. All I did was take all of the pages, lay them all open together in just one giant signature, and I glued the lining to the cover after inserting that ribbon, and then I just took a piece of string and tied it around the pages and around the cover and tied it up at the top in a knot. And so it's loose, it's not stitched in anywhere. And then I just decorated the edge with some beads and charms. But that's it. So it's like a traveler's notebook style, but I didn't use elastic. It's just a regular string, like embroidery floss. But now the pages can come in and out if I want, if I mess something up, if I want to work on it separately out of the journal, if I want to add more pages in the future, like that's a possibility. This is a quick, easy way to make the journal. It still looks nice. You still got all your pages in there. And you don't have to do just one. You could split it into 2 signatures and do 2 strings around it if you wanted to. So that's a fun way and a quick way to bind this journal. And then I did want to show one thing I used the scraps for. This cover, I used this stuffed tag pocket, and I used one of the scraps cut left over, like an offcut, to make a little paper hinge, just a long skinny rectangle that I folded in half, and I glued half to the cover and half to this tab. And now I've made an interactive flip on the cover of the journal. So that's something else I use those thin strips for. Like I said, always just make a pile next to the journal and save all the scraps because you never know when you might need them. Now this other one, this is a Grand Tour journal, and it is made out of a file folder. So I used the cover pieces, but I cut out the 1/2-inch spine. So I ended up with 2 rectangles, a rectangle for the front cover and a rectangle for the back cover, and I glued those onto this file folder. I do have a full video tutorial of how to make this, but I won't go into how it's made here, but I just want to show you, you don't have to make the journals with the covers I give you. You can print those papers out and cut them up and use them in different ways. If you even want to make a fabric covered journal, you can just stitch the paper cover onto the fabric. So lots of ways to use the kits. You don't have to use them the exact way I show you. So that's another fun way to do it. This one, I just threw away the spine piece. It was tiny. I didn't need it, but I did glue, because I just used bookbinding fabric tape for my spine. So those are 2 different alternative methods for binding your junk journals from my kits. And there's definitely other ways to do it as well. But I just wanted to give you 2 other options in case you don't have a bookbinding kit or those tools that we were using earlier in the video. So I hope you guys have fun making this kit. If you ever have any questions or need help, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to help you guys. And I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.